What's up, guys? Harris here. As I'm sure most of you have heard, MrBeast is starting a new project where he invests in up-and-coming YouTube channels, essentially making himself a part owner of those channels. And Twitter has now surrounded itself with a ton of hot takes on whether or not this is a good thing or a bad thing. Whether or not those hot takes are valid is a much larger conversation, maybe one that we should start here today. However, as someone who has not only invested in smaller companies, but also has had investors invest in me, it's not a proper sentence, but we're gonna go with it, there are some things we should discuss. I don't know how many of you know this, I haven't talked about it very much, but there was a point when I only owned about 65% of this YouTube channel. That was probably one of the most stressful periods of my life, and it ended very poorly. That being said, I don't feel particularly negatively about what MrBeast is doing. I'd like to go over some of the keywords in this article that are very telling, and then let's go over some of the negative hot takes. First, and by the way, I'm looking at the Dexerto article on this, it talks about buying minority stakes in YouTube channels while mentoring up-and-coming creators. This implies two things. One, the fact that he owns a minority stake shows that he's not planning on buying control of the channel. The control is still gonna lie within the creator. And two, the fact that he's buying a minority stake shows that he's planning on buying channels that already have considerable value in them. A brand new YouTube channel that doesn't have any momentum has very little to potentially zero value. And the fact that early in the article, he talks about how his payouts will be anywhere from $25,000 to $250,000, and he plans on that being a minority, means that he's investing in channels that already have a lot of momentum, have subscribers, have viewers, have value in them. So he's not going out looking for new channels with neat ideas that he can buy and then control and turn into his workhorses. If he wanted to do that, he'd just buy the entire channel or really just start it up himself. But mentioning that he plans on spending $250,000 for a minority share of a channel means he's aiming for channels that have momentum, have started, and probably have a leader, a creator at the front who knows what they're doing, and he wants to give them a little bit of trust. It also mentions that the reason he wants to do it is because when he was an upcoming YouTuber, often brand deals would pay out a little bit late. He talks about brand deals sometimes paying out up to 5 months after he finished the deal, which I've experienced that, by the way. We had a very big brand deal like 5 years ago, pay out 6 months late. And so he would have to go out and get bank loans for large projects, which again implies that he's planning on working with channels that are already ready to do big projects. We're gonna touch on that again after the negative takes, because that's probably one of the most important things to take away from this. But let's jump into some of the things I saw on Twitter. A large amount of tweets that I'm seeing about this are comparing it to, or asking how it's different from MCNs and how predatory those things were. If you're not familiar with MCNs, by the way, MCNs are called multi-channel networks, which essentially have signed on large groups of YouTubers underneath them and then act as the middleman between those and YouTube. They end up taking, at least the ones that I signed on years ago, they took about 20% of your revenue, and then they supplied you with tools and a team to help you grow your channel. At least that's what it was in theory. The reason everybody's leaving MCNs is because they didn't really do anything for you. They would sign you on, you'd give them 20% of everything you made, and then they did nothing. That was my experience for years with a channel that had hundreds of thousands of subscribers. The problem I have with this comparison isn't gonna be me saying, hey, he's not like an MCN at all. I have no idea how MrBeast is gonna run this. The problem I have with it is that the business model of an MCN at its core isn't a bad one. In fact, early on, the very first MCNs, when MCNs like Machinima were the big thing, you wanted to sign with Machinima, it's because they actually provided a lot of value when they first started. Early on, signing with one of the very first MCNs was the only way that you can actually monetize your YouTube channel. So you signed on with an MCN, you actually started making money. Making an 80% of something is way better than making 100% of nothing. And that's usually what MCNs did for you. They helped you go from making zero money to 80% of whatever they were able to monetize. The problem was they grew so fast, everybody wanted to be on one, that they grew complacent, and within 10 years or whatever, they really just weren't doing anything. They gave you some online tools that nobody ended up using and took a good chunk of your cash. Lots of times then going on to scam their creators, but that's not how it was at the beginning. If MCNs had been run properly and continued to innovate, they could potentially have provided value even today. The other big criticism I'm seeing is that MrBeast wants to buy up a bunch of YouTube channels, force the creators to do things he wants them to do, and they become his milk cows that he just milks dry until he's gotten everything he wants out of them and he takes all their stuff. Now, this is for the most part not a problem if he plans on buying minority stakes, and we'll have to see if he sticks to that in the future. If he goes out and buys 80% of a YouTube channel, it is very likely that this could happen. However, when I talk about how my experience with the investor was one of the most stressful experiences of my life, I sold sold about 30% of my company to him for, I want to believe, $30,000. That guy had zero experience with YouTube or content creation or live streaming. I just had a personal connection to him, so I was able to sit in a room with someone who was looking to invest in something. Essentially, he expected a brand new channel to start turning a profit within like 2 months. You and I both know how that goes. As soon as he realized he wasn't making the money immediately the way he expected to, he started hounding me. I felt a lot of pressure. He ended up backing out after like 3 or 4 months. I had to give him back any money that was left over, any of the equipment we had bought with it, and honestly, a very discouraging moment for me. I felt a lot of failure then. It probably would have been the easiest moment at that time for me to quit and just get a job. Fortunately, we know how this ends, and that 30% he would have owned, I own it again. So that's a win all around. Wait. No, it was a win for me. Fortunately, Mr. Beast himself is a YouTuber in this situation. He understands how it works. He understands the slow growth. He also understands the audience's relationship with the YouTuber, and you can't just make a drastic change and expect drastic growth to happen. Usually that ends up killing a channel. But ultimately, we'll have to watch and see how he handles his first couple investments, because I could be entirely wrong, and who knows, maybe he'll drive a couple into the floor. Time will tell. So the question is, should you let Mr. Beast invest in your YouTube channel? Actually, I think the better question would be, could you let Mr. Beast invest in your YouTube channel? Interestingly enough, most of the takes that I've seen on this were from brand new YouTube channels talking about whether or not they would let Mr. Beast invest in their idea. The issue with that is, Mr. Beast probably isn't interested in investing in ideas. He is most likely interested in investing in people, which is the lifeblood of a YouTube channel. A YouTube channel isn't created out of an idea. It's created out of an idea taken by a person and executed in a specific way that only that person can do it. Take me, for example. If I were interested in investing in a YouTuber, if someone came up to me and said, hey, I have this really neat idea. I want to make a channel around this. Will you help me start this YouTube channel? There are two big problems with this that are both massive red flags and reasons why I would say no. The first one is, why are you essential to this great idea if you haven't done anything yet, if you haven't attached your identity to it yet? This is a big question asked at pitch meetings for investors. Why don't I just go out and do it myself? What's to stop me from doing that? And if you haven't started the idea yet, the answer is usually nothing. Again, if I were interested in that idea, I wouldn't pay for the idea from a person. That person doesn't own the idea. You can't own an idea. I would go out and do it myself. Why do you think every company has competition? Ideas aren't owned, ideas are executed. And the biggest problem I would have with that, and essentially the reason I made this video, is because if someone comes to me with a YouTube idea and they haven't even started it yet, or maybe have only been doing it for about a month and want some help then, that's cutting a corner. Every YouTuber you see that is successful made YouTube channels for free, most likely for years. I know I did. I made videos on this channel and didn't make a single dollar for about 3 years. As a YouTuber myself, I understand the level of commitment that is required to do this job. And I know that even when you start making money, that level of commitment only goes further. If someone is coming to me trying to cut the very first corner, I know that they're mostly going to try to cut every single corner in the future, and there's not a chance I'm going to invest in that person. So, should you let Mr. Beast invest in your company? Time will tell. We'll have to watch and see, but I do hope that the first person he approaches has a team around him, has management, has an agent who can negotiate things and make sure that this person isn't getting screwed over on this very first trial. However, should you approach someone like Mr. Beast for investing in your channel? If it is a new channel that's not making any money, no. Because what's most likely going to happen is if you have a great idea, they're going to do it themselves, and rightfully so. And as always, happy streaming. I'm excited to talk to you. How is this working, by the way?
What do you mean?
Because, well, you're like not. You're not a. Are you a person? You understand what you understand what I mean, right? How do I ask that question? How do I ask that question?